What if I told you that the single most powerful thing you could do for your health after age 70 isn't a pill, a supplement, or a surgery? It's something you already do every single day, and you've probably been doing it wrong. We spend billions of dollars searching for the next breakthrough drug, the next miracle molecule, the next medical innovation that will add years to our lives. But sometimes the most powerful medicine isn't hiding in a laboratory. It's hiding in plain sight, in the way you move your own body. Because here's what the research shows. After 70, how you walk may matter more than how much you walk. The speed, the posture, even the length of your stride, these aren't just signs of aging, they're windows into your cardiovascular health, your brain health, and yes, your lifespan. Today I want to show you one simple change to the way you walk, something you can start doing in the next 5 minutes that has been shown to reduce your risk of falls, extend your independence, and in some studies, add years to your life. This isn't about walking more, it's about walking smarter. And by the end of this talk, you'll know exactly how. Let me start with a number that might surprise you. Not a number about diet, not a number about cholesterol, not even a number about blood pressure, but a number about how fast you walk across a room. Researchers have found that gait speed, the pace at which you naturally walk, is so predictive of survival in older adults that some scientists have started calling it the sixth vital sign. Think about that for a moment. We already track 4 or 5 vital signs in every doctor's visit: heart rate, blood pressure, temperature, respiratory rate, sometimes oxygen saturation. And now, walking speed is being placed right alongside them because it turns out this one simple measurement can tell us more about a person's future health than almost any lab test we run. Here's how researchers arrived at this idea. In a landmark study published in the Journal of the American Medical Association, scientists pooled data from over 34,000 older adults across multiple countries, all over the age of 65. They simply measured how fast each person walked over a short distance. Nothing more complicated than a stopwatch and a hallway. Then they tracked these individuals for years. What they found was staggering. Gait speed alone predicted survival with a level of accuracy that rivaled complex combinations of age, sex, chronic disease history, hospitalizations, and body mass index. In other words, watching someone walk across a room for a few seconds told doctors nearly as much about their future health as an entire folder of medical records. Why would something so simple, the speed of your stride, carry so much biological weight? Because walking is not just a mechanical act of putting one foot in front of the other. It is one of the most complex, coordinated activities the human body performs. To walk efficiently, your brain must communicate seamlessly with your muscles. Your cardiovascular system must deliver oxygenated blood precisely where it's needed, moment to moment. Your nervous system must process balance signals from your inner ear, pressure signals from your feet, and visual signals from your eyes, integrating all of it in real time. Your joints, your bones, your muscular strength, all of it has to work together in harmony. So when gait speed begins to slow, it's rarely just a hip problem or a knee problem. It's often the first visible sign that something deeper in the system is beginning to falter, whether that's cardiovascular decline, early cognitive changes, loss of muscle mass known as sarcopenia, or even subclinical inflammation quietly damaging blood vessels years before any diagnosis appears. Your legs, in a sense, become messengers, carrying information about the health of organs far removed from them: your heart, your brain, your blood vessels. Consider the vascular connection specifically. Every step you take requires your heart to pump blood efficiently to muscles working in real time. Blood vessels must dilate and constrict appropriately, delivering oxygen and nutrients on demand. When those vessels become stiff or damaged, a hallmark of cardiovascular aging, walking becomes harder, slower, and more labored, often before a person even notices shortness of breath or chest discomfort in other contexts. In this way, a slowing walking pace can act almost like an early warning system for the cardiovascular system, appearing in the data years before a heart attack or stroke might otherwise be predicted. The brain connection is equally compelling. Walking speed correlates closely with white matter integrity in the brain, the networks responsible for transmitting signals efficiently between regions. Some neurologists now use gait assessments as an early clue to cognitive changes, sometimes appearing even before memory issues become noticeable. A slowing stride in certain cases can be one of the earliest visible signs that the brain's processing speed and neural connectivity are shifting well before a formal diagnosis would ever be considered. And then there's the muscular piece, sarcopenia, the age-related loss of muscle mass and strength that often begins as early as our 40s and accelerates significantly after 70. Because walking is a full-body, weight-bearing activity, gait speed offers a real-time readout of how much functional muscle strength remains. This is not the same as muscle size or appearance. It's about functional power, the kind of strength required to push off the ground, stabilize the pelvis, and propel the body forward with control and confidence. Put all of this together, and you begin to see why researchers were able to predict survival from something as ordinary as walking speed. It isn't that walking speed itself is magical. It's that walking speed is a mirror, a compressed, real-time reflection of cardiovascular health, neurological integrity, and muscular strength, all happening simultaneously, all measurable in the time it takes to cross a room. This is precisely why the walking change I'm about to share with you carries so much significance. Because if walking speed is a window into biological age, and if slowing gait can appear years before disease is diagnosed, then the reverse may also be true. Improving how you walk, deliberately and specifically, may be one of the most direct ways to influence the very systems that gait speed reflects: your heart, your brain, and your muscles all at once. Most people believe that walking for health is simply a matter of accumulation. Get your 10,000 steps, hit your daily quota, and the rest takes care of itself. This idea has been repeated so often that it has become almost gospel in public health messaging. But when we look closely at the research on aging, cardiovascular protection, and fall prevention, a different and more precise picture emerges. It's not simply how many steps you take, it's how you take them. The specific change I want to walk you through involves two interconnected elements: stride length and intentional foot placement, combined with a slightly faster, more deliberate cadence, what researchers often call purposeful walking, as opposed to passive or shuffling gait. This distinction matters enormously, especially after 70, because the natural tendency as we age is to shorten our stride and shuffle rather than stride confidently. This shift often happens gradually, almost invisibly, as a subconscious compensation for balance concerns or muscle weakness. The problem is that this compensation, while it may feel safer in the moment, actually accelerates the very decline it's trying to protect against. Here's why. A shortened, shuffling stride reduces the range of motion in the hip flexors and glutes, two muscle groups that are absolutely critical for stability and power generation. When these muscles are used less through a full range of motion, they weaken further, creating a downward spiral. Weaker muscles lead to shorter strides lead to less muscle engagement, and less muscle engagement leads to even weaker muscles. Over months and years, this pattern compounds, and it is one of the primary mechanisms behind the fragility we associate with advanced age. The shuffling walk that looks like aging is in many cases actually the result of an adaptable but ultimately self-defeating survival strategy the body adopts. The walking change reverses this pattern by deliberately re-engaging full-range movement. This means consciously lengthening the stride slightly beyond what feels automatic, allowing the heel to strike first with control, rolling through the middle of the foot and pushing off deliberately through the toes at the end of each step. This heel-to-toe rolling motion, sometimes called an active push-off, recruits the calf muscles, the glutes, and the hip flexors in a coordinated sequence that shuffling walking simply does not activate. Every single step becomes, in effect, a small strength training repetition for the lower body, repeated hundreds or thousands of times throughout the day. There's also a cadence component to this change. Research from mobility and aging specialists has shown that walking at a slightly quicker pace than feels instinctively comfortable, enough to notice a mild increase in breathing rate, but not so much as to feel strained, creates a cardiovascular training effect that gentle, slow walking does not achieve. This is sometimes referred to as walking with intention or purposeful walking, and it's fundamentally different from a leisurely stroll. It asks the heart to work slightly harder, which over time improves the efficiency of oxygen delivery throughout the body, strengthens the heart muscle itself, and helps maintain the elasticity of blood vessels, the same vessels that, when they stiffen, contribute to hypertension and cardiovascular decline. What makes this change so remarkable is that it doesn't require setting aside extra time in your day, joining a gym, or purchasing any equipment. It simply requires converting the walking you already do, walking to the mailbox, walking through the grocery store, walking from the car to the front door, into an active, purposeful movement rather than a passive one. This is precisely why it's so powerful for people after 70. It doesn't demand new time or new resources. It demands new attention to a movement pattern that has likely become unconscious and over the years subtly diminished. Physical therapists who specialize in gait retraining in older adults have documented measurable improvements using this exact approach. In several clinical observations, patients who practice deliberate stride lengthening and active push-off, even for just a few weeks, showed improved balance scores, increased lower body strength, and notably, an increased natural walking speed, even when they weren't consciously trying to walk fast. This last point is significant because remember what we discussed about gait speed as a predictor of longevity. Improving the mechanics of how someone walks appears to organically improve the very metric that correlates so strongly with survival. There is also a balance and fall prevention dimension to this specific change that deserves attention. A longer, more controlled stride with deliberate heel strike creates a wider, more stable base of support throughout the walking cycle compared to a shuffled step, where the feet often stay closer together and closer to the ground. This seemingly small difference in mechanics is one of the reasons gait retraining programs have shown reductions in fall incidence among older populations, since falls, and the injuries that follow them, remain one of the leading causes of loss of independence and mortality after 70. So when I say this is one simple change, I mean it in the most literal sense, a shift in stride length, foot placement, and pace that transforms an unconscious, often protective shuffle into an active, engaged, full-range movement pattern. It doesn't require new equipment, new time, or a new location. It requires only a new awareness brought to a movement you already perform dozens, if not hundreds of times every single day. When we think about protecting the heart, our minds usually go straight to diet, cholesterol medications, or perhaps a cardiologist's stress test. When we think about protecting the brain, we imagine puzzles, memory games, or perhaps a conversation about genetics. Rarely do we think about these two vastly different organ systems being influenced by the exact same daily action. Yet the walking change I described, lengthening your stride, engaging a deliberate heel-to-toe push-off, and walking with slightly more purposeful cadence, appears to send protective signals to both the cardiovascular system and the brain simultaneously, through mechanisms that are becoming increasingly clear in the research. Let's start with the vascular system, because this is where some of the most compelling evidence lives. Every time your calf muscles contract during that active push-off phase of walking, they perform something physiologists call the skeletal muscle pump, or sometimes the second heart. This mechanism helps propel blood back up through the veins of the legs toward the heart, working in tandem with your actual heart to maintain healthy circulation. When walking becomes shallow and shuffling, this pump is engaged minimally. But when the stride lengthens and the push-off becomes deliberate, the calf muscles contract more forcefully and more completely, enhancing venous return and reducing the pooling of blood in the lower extremities that can contribute to swelling, clotting risk, and circulatory sluggishness, particularly in older adults who may already spend more time sitting. Beyond circulation, there's the matter of the blood vessels themselves, specifically something called endothelial function. The endothelium is the thin layer of cells lining the inside of every blood vessel in your body, and its health is central to preventing atherosclerosis, the buildup of plaque that leads to heart attacks and strokes. Research has shown that rhythmic, moderately vigorous movement, the kind produced by purposeful walking rather than a passive shuffle, stimulates the release of nitric oxide from these endothelial cells. Nitric oxide causes blood vessels to relax and dilate, improving blood flow and reducing the mechanical stress that contributes to arterial stiffening over time. This is not a hypothetical benefit. It's one of the reasons walking programs have repeatedly been shown to lower blood pressure in clinical trials, particularly when the walking intensity is high enough to elevate heart rate modestly, which slow shuffling generally fails to achieve. Now let's turn to the brain, because the connection here is in some ways even more striking. The hippocampus, a brain region essential for memory formation, is one of the few areas of the adult brain capable of neurogenesis, the creation of new neurons throughout life. Research using brain imaging in older adults has demonstrated that consistent, moderately vigorous walking is associated with increased hippocampal volume over time, whereas sedentary behavior is associated with hippocampal shrinkage. The mechanism appears to involve a protein called brain-derived neurotrophic factor, often abbreviated as BDNF, which acts almost like fertilizer for brain cells. Levels of BDNF rise in response to aerobic movement that's vigorous enough to elevate heart rate, and this walking change, the lengthened stride, the deliberate cadence, pushes ordinary daily walking into that vigorous enough zone far more effectively than a slow, shuffled pace. There's also a fascinating connection between gait mechanics and something neurologists call dual task processing, the brain's ability to manage multiple cognitive demands simultaneously, such as walking while thinking or walking while talking. Deliberate, coordinated walking recruits the prefrontal cortex and cerebellum in ways that shuffling, low-attention walking does not, because active gait requires more real-time postural adjustment, more balance correction, and more coordination between the visual system and the motor system. Some researchers have proposed that this recruitment functions almost like a workout for the brain's executive function circuits, the same circuits that tend to decline first in age-related cognitive changes. What's particularly compelling is how these two systems, cardiovascular and neurological, appear to reinforce one another through this walking change. Improved endothelial function and reduced arterial stiffness mean better blood flow to the brain itself, including to the small vessels responsible for delivering oxygen and glucose to neurons. Cerebral blood flow is highly sensitive to vascular health, and many neurologists now believe that vascular contributions to cognitive decline are far more significant than previously understood, sometimes described under the umbrella term of vascular cognitive impairment. In other words, a walking change that improves vascular elasticity doesn't only protect the heart, it may simultaneously be protecting the delivery system that keeps brain tissue nourished and functioning. Some longitudinal studies following older adults for years have tracked both walking mechanics and cognitive testing scores simultaneously, and the pattern that emerges is consistent. Individuals who maintain a more purposeful, mechanically active gait, longer stride, more deliberate push-off, moderately elevated pace, tend to show slower rates of cognitive decline and lower incidence of cardiovascular events compared to those whose walking becomes progressively shorter and more shuffled with age. Correlation alone doesn't prove causation, but when you combine this observational data with the known physiological mechanisms, the muscle pump, the nitric oxide release, the BDNF elevation, the prefrontal cortex engagement, a coherent picture emerges of a single daily action exerting protective effects across two of the body's most vital systems at once. There is a particular kind of fear that tends to settle in as people move through their 70s and beyond. Not necessarily a fear of dying, but a quieter, more persistent fear of becoming dependent, of losing the ability to get up from a chair unassisted, of needing someone else to help with the stairs, the bathroom, the walk to the mailbox. This fear is not irrational. It is rooted in a very real and well-documented phenomenon that geriatric medicine calls the frailty cascade. And understanding it is essential to understanding why this walking change matters so profoundly for independence, not just survival. Frailty does not typically arrive as a single dramatic event. It arrives gradually, through a chain reaction. It often begins subtly, a slight decrease in muscle strength, a slightly shorter stride, a bit more caution on uneven ground. Because these changes feel manageable, the natural response is to compensate. Walk a little slower, take a little less distance, sit down a little more often. But each of these compensations, while protective in the short term, quietly reduces the physical demand placed on muscles and the cardiovascular system. And because the body adapts to reduced demand by reducing capacity, this creates a slow, self-reinforcing decline. Muscles that are used less become weaker. Weaker muscles make walking feel harder. Walking that feels harder gets avoided even further. Over months and years, this cascade can transform a person who is managing well independently into someone who requires assistance with basic daily activities. And research has shown that falls are frequently the tipping point that accelerates this transition from independence to dependence. This is precisely where the walking change becomes not just a health optimization, but something closer to a form of insurance against this cascade. By deliberately lengthening the stride and engaging in active, controlled push-off through the toes, you are directly counteracting the very mechanism that drives frailty. Instead of muscles quietly weakening through disuse, they are being asked, with every single step throughout the day, to work through their full range of motion. This is functional strength training disguised as ordinary movement. No gym membership, no special session set aside. Simply a different way of doing something you were already going to do anyway. The fall prevention implications of this specific change deserve particular attention because falls represent one of the most significant threats to independence after 70. According to data tracked by public health researchers, falls are a leading cause of both fatal and non-fatal injuries among older adults, and the consequences extend far beyond the physical injury itself. A hip fracture, for instance, often leads not only to surgery and rehabilitation, but frequently marks the beginning of a permanent shift toward reduced mobility, assisted living, or loss of independent function altogether. The walking mechanics we've discussed, a longer stride, deliberate heel strike, active push-off, create what biomechanists refer to as a wider and more stable base of support throughout each phase of the gait cycle. A shuffled step, by contrast, often keeps the feet closer together and closer to the ground, which might feel intuitively safer, but actually reduces the margin for correction if a stumble occurs. Active, engaged walking builds in more opportunity for the body to detect an imbalance early and correct it before a fall happens, rather than after. There is also a psychological dimension to this that shouldn't be underestimated. Confidence in movement is not simply a mental state. It has measurable physical consequences. Older adults who fear falling often develop what researchers call a fear avoidance pattern, where the anxiety about falling leads to reduced activity, which then leads to the very muscle weakness and balance decline that makes falling more likely in the first place. This creates a cruel irony. The fear of falling can itself contribute to the physical decline that causes falls. Practicing this deliberate walking change offers a way to interrupt that cycle, because as stride mechanics improve and strength returns through repeated functional use, confidence tends to rise alongside physical capability. And that renewed confidence often translates into a willingness to remain active in ways that further reinforce the physical gains. What makes this particularly meaningful is the time frame involved. Independence is not typically lost all at once. It erodes gradually, often through small decisions made over years. Choosing not to take that walk because it feels tiring, choosing to sit rather than stand, choosing the shorter, more cautious step instead of the confident, engaged one. Each of these choices seems reasonable in isolation, but cumulatively, they build the very fragility they were meant to avoid. The walking change reverses this trajectory by embedding strength, balance training, and cardiovascular conditioning directly into the fabric of daily movement, rather than requiring it to be sought out separately. Physical therapists working in geriatric rehabilitation have observed that patients who adopt this kind of purposeful gait retraining often regain not just physical markers of strength and balance, but a broader sense of agency over their own mobility. They begin to trust their bodies again in situations that previously provoked hesitation: uneven sidewalks, stepping off curbs, navigating stairs without a handrail. This reclaimed trust is, in many ways, the essence of independence itself. Not the absence of physical limitation, but the confidence and capability to move through the world on one's own terms for as long as possible. So here's what I want you to take away from everything we've covered today. Your walk is not just a way of getting from one place to another. It's a mirror reflecting the health of your heart, your brain, and your muscles all at once. And the beautiful thing about this is that you don't need new equipment, new time, or a new location to start protecting yourself. You simply need to bring intention to a movement you already perform every single day. Lengthen your stride. Roll through that heel-to-toe push-off. Walk with a little more purpose the next time you head to the mailbox or across a parking lot. That's it. That's the change. If this information gave you something valuable today, please consider subscribing to the channel and let me know in the comments what's one change you're going to make to the way you walk starting today.